Welcome to the Beverage Click podcast, the only podcast where we discuss drinking trends with an Asian perspective. I'm your resident host, Sean O, certified beverage specialist and co-founder of the Beverage Click Academy in Singapore and Malaysia. And here is this month's episode. Hey my drinking comrades, Sean O here, and welcome back to the Beverage Click podcast. Most people, even wine lovers, can name drop Barossa, Margaret River, maybe Yarra. But I dare say Mount Gambier, and I'm betting a lot of you will go, wait, where? And that's exactly why this episode exists. Because Australia isn't one wine story, it's a whole library. The diversity here is wild. Different latitudes, different soils, different exposures, and climates that swing from warm inland sunshine to genuinely cool maritime edges. During my last Limestone Coast trip, the headlines usually go straight to Coonawarra and Pathway. And fair play, they're iconic. But the Limestone Coast is bigger than that. You've got Rathenbury, Mount Benson, Rope, and then there's the real curveball, Mount Gambier. This place is a geology lesson disguised as a wine destination. Mount Gambier is built around a young volcanic complex. A cluster of crater lakes form when eruptions punched up through limestone. The most famous is Blue Lake, and here's a crazy part. It turns brilliant cobalt blue in the warmer months, roughly during November through to March. And it's not only just a pretty lake, it's also a major water source sitting in the volcanic crater and fed by groundwater systems. Just nearby, you also got other crater lakes like Valley Lake, plus sinkholes and cave systems that exist because this whole wine region is built on ancient limestone laid down when the area was under the sea. Now, climate-wise, Mount Gambier drinks cool air for breakfast. You're down in the far southeast, under strong ocean influence, and even in peak summer months, the maximums just sit approximately around mid-20s, and across the year, the mean max is about 19 degrees, which is a big clue as to why the wines can feel tighter, brighter, and more restrained than what many people assume Australian wines, inverted commas, always is. And across the Limestone Coast, more broadly, the cool, coastal, maritime influence is a recurring theme. Slower ripening, flavor build-up, and freshness. So today, we're heading into Mount Gambier with winemaker Andy Burchell of Good Intentions Winery to talk about what it means to make wine in a place that's part volcano, part limestone labyrinth, and entirely off most people's radar. All right, let's get into it. And welcome back to another episode of the Beverage Click podcast. For this trip or this session, we are in Mount Gambier, and I have the privilege of having Andy Burchell from Good Intentions Wines. He has a very unique philosophy in terms of winemaking. I want to use the opportunity to speak to him and just understand a little bit more about the wines he makes, the terroir, what's trending in the region, etc., etc. So, good to see you.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
How's things going for you?
Things are going okay. Yeah, it's been an interesting start to the growing season. 12 years of growing grapes in Mount Gambier, and this is the first year I've been frosted quite badly, which is a bit of a shame, but it's all learning curves for your whole business and everything as to how things will bounce back and how things will kind of manage themselves for this year and also for next year and following years, really. So we talked about it last night. They're quite young plantings, so that's been a bit of a thing for this year so far. And we've had a dry winter, so we're looking at whether we're going to have a wet spring and all these sort of things. And so disease pressure's up and that. So yeah, there's to say the nerves of this year's growing season have been at a higher level is probably an understatement. But so that's on a viticulture point, and on a wine point, we've got wines out and new wines out and wines overseas, traveling overseas now. And so yeah, everything as a whole, everything's moving pretty well for us.
Yeah, I mentioned this yesterday. To be honest, I don't know much about Mount Gambier, to be frank, and quite honestly, it's a very new GI.
I think one of the newest. I think I probably could get it wrong, but I think it was like 2004 or 2000 something like that. Fairly new, and I think it's the newest in Australia as far as you guys. There may be one in Western Australia that came up in the last decade.
Okay,
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Terry Strickland told me that.
He was the big one behind setting it all up.
He's a great guy.
Very good.
Looking forward to speaking to him again. But there's a lot of talk that in a way, you put Mount Gambier on the map, at least for the Singapore context, because I've been talking to friends in the trade and even people last night, because your wines, you do quite a fair bit of exportation actually. And I've been speaking to other winemakers from the dinner last night, and not many of them actually export.
No, I think, funnily enough, I think pretty much I'm the only winery exporting wine from Mount Gambier. There's another small label, really good friend of mine called Limestone. Yeah. They're very small and very low-fi and on a very low intervention path, making lovely driven wines on a very hands-off approach. And they export a small amount to America, New Zealand, things like that. I think the thing for me was when I launched into wine was back in 2014. And I suppose other people from Mount Gambier, they were either growing grapes and selling grapes, or the guys like Strickland's at Caroline Hills and Herbert Vineyard, and there's another one, Noski Vineyards, and people like that. They were really on a small scale and were only selling a bit of wine in their cellar door, and it was more of a side hustle. And mine was too to start with, but when I took off, because of my style of wine, it wasn't overly what people were looking for here. So my wines all went to the cities. Yeah, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, Brisbane, that sort of thing. And they were our big markets. And so from there, you get exposed more to the opportunity to export, I think. Like within the second year of making wine, we had our wines in Noma's pop-up here in Australia. So we had a wine that sat at one of the best restaurant tables that the world's seen. So from that, you start to get some recognition, and other countries start to see the wines. And not to mention that we've got some pretty crazy and wild labels that my mate who does all the illustrating does, and so they catch attention from overseas as well.
Yeah, but the label I saw last night was Volcanic Lakes. It's quite minimalistic, actually, but it's eye-catching for me at least.
My same friend that does the other labels, if you've ever seen any of the other labels, he actually hand drew that label as well. So he does them all. And I think we're just trying to showcase the fun style wines on one side, which are still got a place, and they're still very crafted, to these, which I'm trying to, like Pinots and Chardonnays and estate wines, and I'm trying to showcase to be really premium wines. That's the other thing with Mount Gambier is and Australia as a whole, we've found it a challenge to put ourselves up there as a premium brand. And that's really now that I've been a decade or more in the industry, what I want to do moving forward is move past probably what I've been in the past and move towards premium wine and try to help Australia, and particularly Mount Gambier. But Australia is where we've got to start, is showcasing that Australia is capable of making some of the best wines in the world.
I agree. The wine last night was pretty exceptional. I mean, it really truly showcased the terroir, because for me it was the complexity, and that might not make sense to many people, but that mineral salt sensation that you
like
get.
Lifting a rock.
Yeah. When people come to our age, we like licking rocks, right? So how does a typical day of winery look like for you? Because everything is done by you.
Yeah. I try to keep things simple. And what I mean by that is, I suppose, like through the growing season, I try to spend as much time as possible in the vineyards. And that's the key part. So over pruning, I'm pruning. And then now into the spring, I'm on grass management, canopy management, spraying, cultivating, and that sort of thing. And then I have to wedge days in here or there in the winery just to keep up. And then when I get to harvest, I tend to spend all my time in the winery, and I don't venture to the vineyards except for sampling. So I don't do a lot of picking. I don't do a lot of, which has been a development for me. I find the more I can be in the vineyard and the more I'm over the top of all the ferments, the better my wines become.
So it's low intervention.
It's low intervention, yeah, but it's low intervention with maximum effort, or I like to say maximum, it's almost like maximum intervention, but the hands off a pro.
Currently it's not organic yet, right? Is it?
So all my vineyards are organic, but they're just not certified. And the main reason, so they've always been organic. Some of the fruit I purchase from the region here isn't organic because we don't have a great deal of organic sources. Like myself, David Grin, who you would have met last night, the president, his vineyard, I took over and leased and converted that to organic, and he's kept that going is when I handed it back to him. Kai, another guy that talks about he's farming organically from Limis Wines. There's new guys, Slow Lane Wines, who are helping him now, making their wines there organic. So we're getting more and more in the organic field. And that's what we're definitely doing. But we don't certify because at times with these wet springs, we have too high a copper regime. Yeah, I'm just starting to look at how I can do that. And also at the moment, I don't know whether I see the value in certification. Like from a point of view of it being a solid thing, yes, but from a point of view of it being another cost in the business, and is that going to lead to anything? And
yeah, that's true.
It's a grey area, put it that way.
Yeah, I think it maybe from the get-go, I think it's probably fine not being certified. As you're more and more exposed to the international market, it opens up different channels for you. But again, it's not a hard and fast rule.
And it is something we've definitely contemplated. And I think if you're going to take that next step, and also the one thing I do believe with organics and certification is I think there's organics and there's organics. And I think sometimes certification helps draw a line in that people can't go, well, like a lot of stories I go back to where people took over conventional vineyards, stopped spraying that year, and then they're selling wines as organic and saying, it takes a few years for a vineyard to become organic from...
3 years, right?
Yeah, and so some people utilize it, and then you get a lot of... We all love Instagram. You get a lot of people that Instagram themselves brush cutting a vineyard and call themselves organic, where for me, organic is more about putting back in than it is doing nothing.
It almost sounds biodynamic from what I'm listening.
And we do get labeled that a lot. Unfortunately, I'm just, we'll call it busy or lazy, that I don't think, one thing I'm not good at, and I always try to get better, is my timing and my precision, I suppose. And biodynamics, which I know a lot about, is all about timing and doing things at the right time. And I stars in the mood. And I reckon I'd always be late.
You were early today.
I was early today. Yeah, you're early. So yeah, biodynamics is definitely something going into the future that we'd like to explore more and be a bit more thorough. But at the moment, when we're the viticulturalist and the winemaker and the sales,
and when everything is you, that's going to be difficult.
It just gets difficult. And that's not the plan forever, but it's just how it's sitting at the moment.
Yeah. There is this natural approach to your wines. So maybe take us through how the winemaking process is like for you.
Yeah. With our white wines, like mainly our Chardonnay is our main thing that we produce. We do produce a small amount of on-skins, Gewürztraminer and things like that. So all of our Chardonnay's all direct pressed, so hand-picked, chilled down fruit, direct pressed. I have a big thing with cleanliness in the winery because we are doing things on a minimal approach. It's about, and we're not using a lot of product. It's about being clean and about making sure fruit's clean and ferments are clean and all your equipment's clean and
without any bread.
100%, yeah, without any bread, just without any bacteria. I use I use sulfur for cleaning, and I use things like that. And I just make sure bottling lines are kept clean before and after every use. And I make sure that presses are kept clean before and after every use, and destemmers and pumps and fermenters and all of that sort of thing. So like for our Chardonnay, for example, we'll direct press that straight to barrel, and we'll barrel ferment the wine, and that'll be with natural yeast. The one thing is people always think it's right on. My winery's got a lot of spider webs in it. And so although everything's clean, I don't like to
mess with it.
To sterilize my place because there's a lot of natural yeast that's held in my winery, and that natural yeast helps to make the wine taste like us, like what we've done. So that's important to us that we're building that yeast profile up all the time. And then once we've barrel fermented, we top barrels and we store them away. And I will do things like stirring some leaves for a small amount of time. But I find with Chardonnay, like the natural yeast gives off a really influential flavour in the wine. As you said, you could see that saline character. You can see that minerality. You can see the natural acidity and all these type of things. And that's what all comes from that. Well, we're on volcanic soils.
Yeah.
And that's what volcanic soils should make a wine taste like, is when you start adding yeasts and enzymes and different products and and fining agents and all of that, that you can start to strip some of that stuff back. So we're very apparent about leaving things in that form. And then we let wines go through all full sugar, full malolactic. And then I just try to top every 2 or 3 weeks. Sometimes it goes out to a month, but
With fresh wine, right? From the vintage.
with fresh wine from the vintage. So we'll always press a small tank off, and then that tank will be used to top Chardonnay. And then we'll leave the wines for 12 months in barrel until we add sulfur.
Yeah.
So
Do you find that because it's very minimal intervention, do you find that there's a lot of variation in terms of year-on-year's produce?
even barrel on barrel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Every barrel has its own personality, and every barrel has taken its own journey. That's why I like to use barriques rather than foudres and things like that, because I find that the barrels all have their own personality
And they give flavor as well.
100%. Where like a foudre, for example, I find the wines sometimes can be a little bit more one-dimensional because they're traveling the same journey together. Yeah. I make lovely wines, don't get me wrong. Some of my most favorite producers use foudres, so it's not that I don't agree with them. And probably if I had a bit more money, I would buy 1 or 2 of them. But
It's expensive.
It is expensive.
I know.
But I do like what barrels do, and particularly barriques. I find and we were talking about cooperages last night, and specific coopers and stuff like that are really important to our cuvee. Yeah, that sort of, and then we're lucky enough to have our own bottling line and labelling facilities, unlike a lot of places that have to pump their wine out into either containers or trucks and ship it 500 plus kilometers to get it bottled. I move it to the window over there and then bottle it on site. So my wine moves very minimal distances, and I think that helps with minimal intervention wines. It helps with not knocking wines around, probably where you get the purity.
Do you find it more stabilized because you're bottling next to a window?
Definitely more. And then from there it goes into cellar stacks and a sheet thrown over it, and it's kept without a lot of light on it for another 12 months before we look at labeling and waxing it and starting to sell it. So I think the wine just has a real uniformity with the place where it was made as well. It's not being shoved in a tank next to 50 other wines from different other wine.
Yeah.
They've got personalities. They're like people. They have to make anyone nervous. Where at least with my wines, that they know what their journey is. It's a gentle ride. It's like I do everything when the temperatures, on fruit days, when
Like
dynamic days. So the wines are treated, and I don't want to go out and saying other people don't, but the wines are treated with the utmost respect. So the same as the vines are treated with the utmost respect, the same as all those sort of things. And I think that's all important in winemaking. Like, it's got such a romantic history that there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes over the years, mass production and new world style wines have affected that a little bit. And so we're just trying to bring back that old world style we don't have to make millions of litres of wine. We just want to make a little bit of wine that connects with people.
Is that why it's called Good Intentions?
Good intentions only exist unless you follow through with your plan. And I was self-taught. I didn't know what I was doing. Down in Mount Gambier, there wasn't many other producers doing what I was doing. So a lot of it was made by trial and error and was just a bit of fun. And also the road to hell was paved with good intentions.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
There's a few little analogies that.
But you did all right for yourself. And that was one of my questions that I wanted to ask you, is that where did you get your know-hows and philosophy obviously is yours, but in terms of technique, etc., it's all self-taught.
Yeah, I worked with friends at the start. There were some really close friends that we were working in wineries together, and then we started knocking around making some wine, and then I became really good friends with some more low intervention or natural winemakers from Australia, like Tom Shodbrook, and just spent time with them. I just enjoyed it. When I went to Europe, first region I went to was Bordeaux, and from seeing all the big domains, but then as I drove through the whole of France and then into Italy, we started to find these really like off the beaten track producers, which are almost just farms of people just selling clean skin wines out the back. If you drive through a gate rusty gate that said Vin on it, and there was an old guy in the garden hoeing away in his veggie garden, his wife would bring out some cheese and or some antipasta, and then you'd drink wine. And these wines spoke to me, wines that were what they would say they would call unnatural wines. They spoke to me because they didn't taste like what I'd tasted growing.
The conventional ones, yeah.
Natural wines. And look, we've transitioned, and I suppose there's been some natural wines have gone completely the other way, and that's started to be a difficult thing as well. And so I like to find that we sit somewhere in the middle, and we're making like we're making a balance of like really high quality wines. We're using sulfur. We're using like malo bugs if we can't get a wine to go through malo. So I don't want malolactic in my wines and stuff like that. So I'm not afraid to use something if I have to, but at the most times I just like to let the wine carry its journey. And most wines, if they're from our vineyard and we know that the vines are in good health, they will just carry that natural progression.
Yeah. Clearly there is a trajectory that you're aiming for, but sure there must be something for the future, right? For the next 5 years or so, and experimentation. What's on your mind?
Yeah, we planted a vineyard at home, which is unfortunately the one that got frosted. So we have a Chardonnay vineyard, which we purchased a few years back.
That's the one that was 100%.
No, the Chardonnay's okay.
Yeah.
So the Chardonnay's fine. A little bit of touch up in a couple of areas, got a bit of hit by frost, but mostly it's fine. But we planted a high density vineyard, 1.5 hectares, to Cabernet Franc, Pinot Noir, Shiraz, Riesling, and Pinot Gris.
Yeah. And
that's really the Chardonnay, and that is the future of the next 5 years for me. We want to buy less grapes. We want to be an estate winery.
Yeah.
I want to make wines from varieties that maybe haven't always had the recognition as being premium wines, but I want to show like Cabernet Franc on volcanic soils. I think it'll be comparable to wines coming out of Hungary and stuff like that. And Riesling off volcanic soils had this really nice smoky characteristic. And the Shiraz that I make is more down like a Nerello Mascalese style on these volcanic soils. So it's a lighter carbonic style Shiraz, which can be beautiful. Yeah. And that's how we've always done our Shiraz down here. And I am on the waiting list for some Nerello and some Caricante, which we have another plot up on the top of the old volcano.
You got to plant
maps. Yeah, well, I'm on the waiting list for the vines, so for the cuttings.
There's a wait list.
There's a wait list in Australia, yeah.
Man.
That could be 5 years away, so maybe we'll talk about this in 5 years' time, see how I went. But I think for me, it's like I want to show like Australia and the rest of the world what this region has to offer. And I could have made wine anywhere. Like I could have chosen anywhere, but I grew up here and I see the volcanic soils. I mean, our crater here that erupted is the youngest like volcano eruptions in Australia by quite a way. Like it erupted about 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. And along the fault line, along Western Victoria, the other stuff's like sort of 10, 20 million plus years.
Yeah.
Not to say they won't erupt next, but they're saying that Mount Gambier is only dormant, so it could erupt again.
Really?
Within now and the next sort of 800 years, 1,000 years.
I'll probably never see it, but
we'll probably never see it. Maybe it would make sense.
Yeah,
but really, bro. But yeah, I think for me, that's the thing. It's like when I came here, Mount Gambier wasn't a hugely known region, still isn't. But for me, it gives me like the ambition to try to put Mount Gambier on the global map of making some of the best. And I think we touched really briefly on last night that obviously the region's known the most for sort of Cabernet Sauvignon around the Coonawarra. And I love Coonawarra Cabernets and the amount of great producers up there. But I think Chardonnay is really underestimated in this region, especially Mount Gambier. Like we've got really like a very cool climate. We're on these volcanic soils. The wines have got this really real uniqueness.
I think it's a special terroir because if you look at Italy, especially southern Italy,
Yeah.
most of the volcanic soils produce extremely unique wines.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably...
And you look as well there, which I love, all the wines down that way, but they're all usually really hot climates as well. So we're showcasing these volcanic profiled wines on a climate basis, so Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays and Rieslings and stuff like that. So I think that's really exciting globally for wine to showcase another sort of style of wine. And that's really fun with the Pinot Noirs, which we haven't really touched on because I didn't taste it. You didn't taste my Pinot Noir last night, but the wines are really fruit forward. They remind me more of wines from like the Auvergne in France and Oregon and Poulsard Pinot style from the Jura mixed. I think they're very savory and they're very light in color, really like pretty. They run at like 12.5%.
Yeah.
And they're this really soft style of Pinot, where Australian Pinots are typically
darker, heavier.
Really like fruit characteristics like forward and that sort of thing. The same thing, I find the Pinot Noirs are a really standalone type of wine as well.
Agreed.
And all of them we do like open fermentation as well. So they're all whole berry open fermentation for sort of 4 or 5 weeks on skins and pressed to tank and settled out and then transferred to barrel and that sort of thing. So we use a really like in an old world method with our Pinot Noir, making with the introduction of oxygen and managing VAs at a really like low level, but giving the wine lift and character.
Yeah, typical VAs tend to have, I don't know, when I taste like natural wines, they tend to have higher VA.
And that's the problem. That's management. That's like winery management. It's either, and you find a lot with natural winemakers that because they're not using sulfur, like the biggest thing I think is they should always be in the winery during the winemaking process. If they're out picking grapes, they're just exposing their wines, because a wine can turn like that. Like it can be fine, and an hour later, it can have a bacterial issue and it's changing. And if you don't deal with that, then that's going to grow. So if you don't keep that cap wet or make sure your vessels are clean, or if you start to see smell a bit of that acidic, you might have to remove that bit of the grape. Or if the winery's not clean and there's vinegar fly around, then things like that, that's what all creates to like poor wine quality. So if your cellar hygiene and your attention to detail, the first guy I ever worked for, the only thing that ever sticks in my head is the words attention to detail. It's what he used to tell me all the time with everything. Attention to detail, AD, attention to detail, attention to detail. And funnily enough, it's stuck in my head. That's with everything in life, but I find with winemaking, especially if you're doing it down a natural path, attention to detail and that thoroughness and that.
It's a lot of OCD involved.
It is. And if you don't have it, that's when you find these natural wines with really high VAs or a mousiness characteristic or too much reduction. I think reduction or like that sulfidey character, I think can be quite interesting in wines as well, as long as it's at a manageable level. And I think I've learned over the 10, 12 years that I've been making wine that some of the mistakes I've made and why I've made them. And I just choose to learn from my mistakes, not be stubborn and go, that's what people should drink. And so I think that's why we've steered away from natural wine, is because we still want wines that are interesting and that make people stop and think every time they taste it.
Do you think VA is a small amount is okay?
Yeah, I do. I think even with my Pinots, I try to keep the VAs around 0.6 to 0.65, and I like them at that level. I think sometimes if Pinots are too clean, they have that like sort of pencil shaving-y character and that kind of that spice, but they don't have any real like that lift, yeah. And I think just that little bit of VA lift in Pinot and in Cabernet is really important. But don't get me wrong, to get that little bit during the winemaking, I'm so precise about not getting any VA. I do everything so there's zero chance of VA, and that gives me that little bit of VA.
Yeah, typically
so if I drop the ball and I see a little bit of VA during the ferment, it's going to be more. So we've done things like that, and where we've managed that is through using sulfur at the right times, where what I used to do was make the wine, get it all the way to the end, and either not add sulfur, or when I started adding sulfur, I was adding all this sulfur at the end to try to hold the wine, where now I've learned to go, I add sulfur to the fruit as soon as I've picked it, just in a watering can, just over the top. And then I chill the fruit in the fridge overnight. Then I'll use sulfur like in the ferments, just with a spray bottle, if I can see anything occurring. And I'll make sure everything's meticulously clean. And then as soon as the wine's gone through primary and malolactic in Pinot Noirs, I'll sulfur the barrels, and I'll keep everything topped as well, so they can't have any oxidization into them.
Little hit space.
And then with the Chardonnay, I do the same. I add the sulfur on the fruit, and then when I'm pressing, I'll add a little bit to the press tray as I'm pressing, just enough because I've still got wild yeast, so it's hard for wild yeast to activate if it's
original sulfur.
Sulfur. And then what I find then is when I do my analysis, when I'm ready to rack the wines, like the cleaner the ferment, the cleaner the wine. And then I rack the wine, and I'm only having to add smaller amounts of sulfur to hold the wine.
How much of sulfur do you use total? Because
Total?
Yeah, because you probably don't have it off the top of your head, but
yeah, I have everything in my head. I don't write it down.
Because from what you're saying, it sounds like it's a lot, but actually it's not that much.
Yeah, so I'd put probably 8 to 10 parts per million on the fruit, and then I might put another 5 to 10 parts in the press. So I might see 10 to 15 parts at the start.
Yeah.
And then at the end, I probably these days use around about 45 to 50 parts when I rack the wine. And then I rack the wine and I leave it in tank for a month or 2 months nearly. And then that helps settle the wine out, and also the sulfur does its work. And then I rack it again before I bottle it.
Yeah.
And so I'm not bottling the wine with sulfur in it. A lot of people go all the way to the end, sulfur it, bottle it, and all that sulfur's trapped in the bottle.
Yeah.
And that's when the wines go dull and lifeless, where my wines are lifted back again by the time they go to bottle. Then they rest and they come out, and they're really powerful and show really well. So by the maximum, I'd be using 55 parts, I reckon. Would be maybe 60. But most of my sulfurs, when they come out, because I just use PMS as well, which is just like powdered sulfur.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. Maybe it's our water. But for some reason, my total sulfurs are always, maybe it's my calculations I've always done, they're always quite a bit lower. So my total sulfurs will be anywhere between 25 to 45 to 50. And then free sulfurs end up, I find, being like, I divide everything by 7, and that ends up my frees. So most of my frees remain at what they call like less than or equal to 3, which is basically 0, or up around about 10 to 15 at the most. Yeah. So like free sulfur, which is great, because that means the sulfur's done what it's supposed to do. And yeah, if anyone's got a better way, then I'm open to it. But as I say, because I do it myself, I just stick to the ways that I do it. But
probably should hook you up with my Bordeaux lecturer, because he's also doing natural style wines in this region called Iou-Legui in France. So we've tried his wines. It's also pretty unique. Again, he has a very different approach to it. I'm not sure how much of sulfur, but the thing is, most consumers have a misconception that natural or biodynamic wines, they actually don't use sulfur. Actually, they do, but to just enough to ensure that the wine is being protected and not...
The thing is, there are some natural wine producers out there that even will put, because we get labelled natural wine, and I try not to put myself in that category, because there are people that go, he's not natural wine because he uses sulfur, and sometimes he's not using organic fruit and this and that, so you can't call him natural. So I'm like, that's fine. Like, I didn't want to be labelled something if it's going to upset someone. But for me, the people that always seem to complain about it are the people whose wines aren't clean.
Yeah. So it's true. It's true. And
the people that are making clean wines in this way aren't the ones complaining, because they just want to make really great wine.
Yeah.
And that's where we've come to. And I've drunk enough Like some of my favorite wines are natural wines without sulfur. You know, some like Damore or all these big time producers. But at the same time, they've been doing it a long time. They've got their ways. And I think some of them might be filtered and stuff like that. And that helps wines and whatever the cause may be. But I think we need to get away from the part of what is, in my opinion, what is natural and what isn't natural. And we should just be looking at the end of what's a good wine and what isn't.
Yeah, I agree.
Good wine.
Yeah, I agree.
That's why I'd like to see it anyway.
Yeah. The next time you're in Singapore, I have to let you, if I still have that bottle, because I bought 2 bottles from Bordeaux, in the region of Côte d'Ivoire, biodynamic producer. And his wines reminded me of yours because when I had it yesterday, and that was the reason why I bought 2, because it was good. It was just a normal Bordeaux Blanc. It was out of this world. I thought, yeah, I like that very saline nature of the wine. So, yeah, good on you. And not least, before we close up, where can people buy your wines from? Aside from Singapore, it's in Providor, right? Providor. Where else can they find it? Other parts of the world because it's exported, right?
Yeah, it's exported through Asia. We're in Singapore and Hong Kong. Japan's a very big market. South Korea as well. We've just come back from a Wine Australia roadshow where we're looking to pick up some distribution in the Philippines and Thailand. We have wine in Taiwan, some wine in Malaysia from time to time. Actually, I should contact that importer. It's been a little while. And then we cross the ocean from here. We're just in New Zealand, over in America, mainly in New York and Brooklyn. We're about to ship an order off to Quebec. We have representation in the UK, really good representation in Norway and Sweden. I'm going to forget people now, aren't I?
Yeah, well, it's pretty global.
Yeah.
It's pretty international.
It gets around, and that's the thing. And then obviously we've got really great representation here in Australia as well. Like I've got distributors that do Queensland, New South Wales, and then another one that does Victoria, and then, Queensland, New South Wales, and ACT, another one that does Victoria. I have another importer down in Tasmania, one in Adelaide, one over in Perth. So we have people on the ground in every capital city of the country. And then obviously the pub you went to last night for dinner, which was
apparently it's your parents' place.
My parents own it. My sister runs it. She wasn't there last night because I was supposed to be babysitting her child, but I had a dinner to go to because my mum was away and my wife was away. Yeah, so the pub there is a very strong supporter. And then we've got our own local cellar door here in town as well, where we have all our own wines, and it's more down a wine bar sort of vibe. And I hand make and hand ferment all the pizza doughs over long, slow ferments, and I ferment chili and honey, and I ferment everything that goes on the gas. My mum grows all the ingredients that go on it, so it's a very like rustic style pizza wine bar. Yeah, and then we do a pop-up down the beach over the summer times, and we try to get as many avenues to sell it as possible, as it's the important part. But we're lucky that we've got really good people backing our brand all around the world, really.
You got another backer in me.
Yeah, good, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess that sums up today.
Yep.
Thank you again for taking the interview.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Cheers.
All right, my drinking comrades. That wraps up today's episode with Andy Burchell from Good Intentions Winery in our little deep dive into Mount Gambier, a place that proves Australia is not one wine style, but a whole spectrum of climates, soils, and stories. A big thank you again to Andy for the time, the insights, and the wines, and thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this one, please subscribe or follow the podcast whenever you're listening, and if your platform allows it, drop a rating and a review. It genuinely helps more people discover the show. And as always, come say hi on Instagram. I'm at SoulThirstyTraveler, that is soul.thirsty.traveler with a single L. Leave a comment on the episode post. Have you heard of Mount Gambier before? And what other underrated regions should we explore next? Till next time, stay curious, drink with intent, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Cheers.